If the embattled IRS wants to rebuild its reputation following its targeting scandal, this next story, sure not going to help much. Government watchdog says the IRS cannot find $67 million. What? $67 million put into a slush fund to cover the costs of implementing Obamacare. The agency says the money appears to have been spent on new employee workspaces and information technology support. But it can't be certain. Okay, we're going to have to follow up on that. In the meantime, the Environmental Protection Agency admitting that its controversial new coal regulations will have absolutely no impact on global warming. The rules announced last week would require new coal-fired plants to capture and store carbon emissions. Supporters had argued the limits were needed to fight climate change, but opponents said it amounted to a war on coal since anti-pollution technology is too expensive. Well, the EPA this week weighed in and said it does not expect the rule to result in, quote, notable CO2 emission changes. Another prominent Republican expressing support for same-sex marriage. Former President George H.W. Bush and his wife Barbara served as official witnesses last weekend at the Maine wedding of two longtime friends, a lesbian couple who are co-owners of a Kennebunkport general store. Same-sex marriage became legal in Maine last December, you'll recall, and other members of the Bush circle have also expressed varying levels of support for gay marriage, including former First Lady Laura, granddaughter Barbara, and former Vice President Dick Cheney. Joining me now to weigh in on all the day's top headlines, our A-team, news director of the Tea Party News Network, Scottie Nell Hughes, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and Fox News contributor Judith Miller, executive editor of the Weekly Standard and Fox News contributor Fred Barnes. Welcome to you all. Scottie, to you first. This poll, Americans rejecting by 61% Obama's demand to keep the government running with funding for Obamacare. Are Democrats not listening to the American people?
Has Democrats ever listened to the American people? That's the big question right now. Nobody wants Obamacare except for those in Washington, D.C. itself. And the hypocrisy of it is, they're not even going to be subject to it. So that's the real question right now. Who are they listening to if they're not even going to be a person that's objected to it as themselves?
Fred, let me let you weigh in, especially considering the president's job approval rating down to 43%. That's tough. Fred Barnes.
I think 43%. I think 43% for Obama at this point, with all the failure he's experienced in his second term so far, is actually pretty good. It probably won't go much lower. I don't think he'll get down in the 20s, but you know, when you think the economy's stagnant, his whole policy in the Middle East has been rocky and unsteady. He was bailed out by Vladimir Putin, and his entire agenda, whether it was gun control or immigration and so on, those are going nowhere. The president's lucky to be at 43%.
The president and his party are holding the chips where it comes to this latest spending battle to keep the government going and then to increase the debt ceiling.
Yeah, nobody wants to close the government, though. Not the Republicans. They'd like to get something. And this list of things that they're going to demand to pass the debt limit, they really only want one thing, and that is to delay of Obamacare being implemented for a year.
Well, let's face it, what they want is to nix the legislation altogether. Judy, let me get you weighing in. How are we going to see the government shut down? What's going to happen with the debt ceiling? We're not going to default, at least according to my next guest. Most people tend to agree that.
Yes, Larry Summers, whom I spent the weekend with in Yalta, said that he did not think that the government was going to default.
Well, how does Larry feel about not being the next Fed chief?
I think he's not happy about it. On the other hand, he was very gracious. He never said anything about the president. However, I will say, for all of those who are talking about the president's unpopularity and pushing Obamacare through an unwilling American public, I have to point out that as unpopular as Obama is, the Congress is even more unpopular. Their approval stands at 14%. 4 out of 5 do not like the job they're doing. So I think that the president stands to come out a winner on this one.
All right, it seems they're just trying to get this done before the next presidential election cycle. It always boils down to politics. Judy, I want to stay with you because a lot of breaking news regarding Iran and Syria this evening. Let's start with Syria. Are you at all confident that the UN resolution, that we've got some kind of draft resolution to contain the chemical weapons, will be successful?
I'm very disappointed in this accord, which has just been announced by Ambassador Samantha Power. Basically, what they've done is the Russians have agreed to support the language that the Americans are proposing. However, it calls upon Syria to disarm itself of chemical weapons, but it does not have a clause that enables the use of force if Syria does not agree.
So there's still the threat of force.
There's not the threat of force, which means that this is a toothless resolution, which is not going to be brought under Chapter 7, which enables the use of force, which means that it's a nice statement of the sense of the House, the sense of the body and the international community, but it doesn't look like it's going to have any teeth.
Well, it's real simple. I think it sounds like the Russian House is actually listening more to the American people than our own House is listening to us, because overwhelmingly the majority of Americans did not want to see us get into Syria. For one reason only. We really don't know if we're on the right side of that whole issue.
Yeah.
And especially when you're looking at al-Qaeda sitting here having these recent attacks in the malls over the weekend, we're still kind of confused. Whose side should we be on in Syria? So I think it's really, I'm actually kind of happy to see this resolution be kind of toothless, and I'm hoping, and I think Barack Obama is too, that it kind of just kind of fades into the background like the rest of the scandals.
Fred, let me pivot to you with the issues with Iran. We just heard from Secretary of State speaking with CBS News that if Iran agrees to open up its uranium enrichment facilities, that the U.S. would consider dropping some of those sanctions against Iran. How do you feel about this? Toothless? Would you use that word to describe this one?
I can think of worse words, but I'll settle for toothless. It's certainly unnecessary. Look, we know they'll cheat, just like the North Koreans have. They say, well, we'll close down this facility. Meanwhile, they'll have a secret facility. They are getting pretty desperate, the Iranians are, to get rid of these sanctions, particularly on the banking and so on. But, you know, Obama is so eager to get us an agreement. I think he's almost necessarily going to get a bad one. The Iranians know this. Why would they have suddenly made these overtures toward President Obama if they didn't think that he was acting from weakness?
Absolutely. That's a great point. We'll have to leave it there. Judy Miller, Scottie, Nell, Hughes, and Fred Barnes.